that has been assisting provinces preparing for climate change reporting and looking at greenhouse gas inventories and target setting, training, and all these various different aspects. And so, of course, I think there's a lot of people on this call that we have that we are quite familiar with. So just in case there aren't, there's also Brett Cohen is part of the team, Martin and Feleng are also on the call as well. So they're all part of the Gondwana team. So today's webinar, so we've had 2 webinars. The last one we just looked at the climate change bill and really what that meant for provinces and what the responsibility was for provinces in terms of the climate change bill. And so today we are going to be having a session on looking at accessing funding for climate change activities, looking at sectoral emission targets and emission target guidelines, and then having a short session on tracking provincial contributions to NDC targets. And then we can open it up for some discussions thereafter. So without further ado, perhaps I will just hand over to Sibusiso, who's going to give us the presentation on accessing climate change funding. Sibusiso, maybe you can, I'm hoping you can share if you need to share your screen, but perhaps you can also just introduce yourself at the beginning of the presentation. Great, thanks.
Good morning, colleagues. I'm just trying to share my presentation, but okay. I hope it's on presentation mode from your side.
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. Good morning, colleagues. Sibusiso Ngumalo from the DFFE supporting work around climate. Sorry, I think this is the wrong presentation. Sorry. 1 second. Sorry, can I stop sharing this one? Oh, 1 second.
While you're getting ready, just a reminder maybe to everybody, the registration link is in the chat. So if you can just fill that in, I'd appreciate it. Thanks. Back to you, Sibusiso.
Okay. Okay, I'm unable to share what's on my current screen. 1 second, I'm just trying to share what's on my current screen because yeah. Okay. Yes, I hope you can see the title, Accessing Climate Change Funding.
Yes, perfect.
Support. Oh, okay. Yes, apologies for that, colleagues. Good morning. Sibusiso supporting work around climate finance and the just transition within the Chief Directorate Mitigation and Specialized Monitoring Services at the DFFE. So basically, it's this presentation is established to just give an idea to support provincial and subnational government in terms of the opportunities available to access climate finance funding and support I will draw on in both international and domestic mechanisms with the enactment of the bill into an act. There is now a sort of a transformed regime into the new Climate Change Act, which sets out certain requirements and makes also certain financial provisions. And these financial provisions under the bill are still being finalized by National Treasury as well as the TFFE and subsequently involved institutions in that process. So just to highlight, climate finance addresses both mitigation and adaptation issues, and mitigation entails actions that limit the magnitude of rates of long-term climate change through reducing emissions, and then actions related to adaptation result in reducing the actual expected impact of climate change, such as drought and flooding. So there's already monies that are targeted at these two response measures. And then there's also emerging financing mechanisms around also the just transition uh, imperative. So in terms of the traditional climate finance sources, we have climate finance emanates from public, private, and philanthropic sources. The logic is that developed countries are responsible for large amounts of emissions per capita, and that developing nations require assistance from developed nations for transitioning to the current development conditions that require support by the international community for us to transition in a way that is sustainable. And some of the existing financing options includes grants, concessional finance, as well as green bonds and other such as co-financing. And all of these aspects, there are various conditions that are set by the financial institutions. Some of the climate finance providers in South Africa, we have the GCF, the Global Environment Facility, the adaptation funds from multilateral agencies, as well as bilateral agencies through countries such as Germany, UK, Belgium, Government of Flanders, EU, and USA. These funds, some of them, they channel money directly into the national treasury, some through their financing projects directly through those certain projects that are established, and some are channeling money through DFIs such as DBSA, SANB. And then we also have the South African domestic financing mechanisms, which the National Treasury will make provisions after since the bill the Climate Change Act is now in law. So we at the DFFE have a mandate to track climate finance. This entails mobilizing financial resources from a wide range of sources, public, private, bilateral, and multilateral, as well as philanthropic organization. It is increasingly important to track and report climate financial flows that support climate change mitigation as well as adaptation actions. So there's a need to build trust and accountability regarding climate finance commitment, as well as to monitor the trends and progress in climate-related investments. There's also a need to consider transparency, comparability, and comprehensiveness, tracking of climate finance, and also to support better project and program design and to facilitate the mobilization of climate finance resources. At the DFFE, we have a mandate to track climate finance, and it's part of it forms part of our reporting obligations to the UNFCCC. We report through the biennial transparency reporting mechanisms. So at the moment, we are currently working towards a climate finance tracking framework to guide climate finance reporting, as well as on this aspect to further cascade this process to assist provinces and national government to also be able to track their climate spending through, whether it's through the government fiscus or also through support uh, from where they would have accessed climate change funding. And then some of the climate finance work streams that are currently happening in the country, led by the National Treasury. We have the climate budget checking work. We've got also the work around green finance taxonomy and also sustainable finance. And then with the endorsement of the uh, strategy. So from the DFFE, we are mainly to guide climate finance reporting, both at national, provincial, as well as local level. And then we have the local government support program that assists local government with climate change, climate finance proposal development. Uh,
You seem to be breaking up a little bit. You're coming and going at the moment. Well, gone at this moment. Super Cecil, can you hear us?
I think he's gone completely.
Is he gone completely?
It looks like it. I don't even
apologies, colleagues. I'm back.
Back.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, apologies. Yeah. So I don't know where I last ended, but was I on this slide?
Lowen, can I
Or
ask him to,
previous?
this one? Can he go back to, I think I first lost him on the previous slide, I think.
Okay. Do
Or
you want
was
to
it
go back to the
this
previous?
slide?
Yeah, if not the previous, I think there's a previous one.
This
Yes.
was the previous one. Okay, apologies, colleagues. Yes. Okay, so we are working towards a climate tracking framework, climate finance tracking framework within the DFFE. So basically the framework is intended to guide the process of reporting from our end, and we intend to also support subnational government and municipalities to be able to track their climate expenditure, and also from any amounts or external amounts that are received through accessing climate finance from other organizations. So basically, this slide sort of highlights our framework. And then from the climate finance work streams currently happening in South Africa, from the National Treasury, we have the climate budget tagging work stream, the green finance taxonomy, and also the sustainable finance. And then with the recent endorsement of or the new law, the Climate Change Act being now in law, there's an appetite by National Treasury to commission work around the climate finance strategy. And then this strategy will sort of try to inform uh, climate finance access. Sorry. And then from the TFFE, the work that we are leading is the establishment of the climate finance tracking framework to guide reporting, and also there's work around the local government support program to assist local government with climate finance proposal development, where they will be able to apply for advertised calls to be able to access climate finance. And then from the Presidential Climate Commission, it's undertaking climate finance landscape studies every 2 years, which we as the TFFE also support that work and sit in the project steering committees as well as the climate finance commissioners working group. We support that work. And then also uh, at the National Treasury Climate Resilience Symposium that the PCC launched the Just Transition Financing Mechanism, which has now been in place to also, this is a financing facility that subnational governments and provinces can apply to if they have a relevant project. And then from the presidency, we have the project management unit, the JET IP, Just Energy Transition Project Management Unit, where this is also a facility that can be explored in terms of applying for funding. And then, so the rationale behind the work around CBT, we have already, as the national department, we've already been commissioned by National Treasury to tag our budget, which we are currently working on that work. So basically, the rationale is for South Africa is endeavoring to manage climate change risk. National Treasury recognizes the risk that climate change poses to the fiscal, financial, and economic stability, and the need to integrate such risk into fiscal and economic policy modeling, and then support the integration of integrated risk into MESCO fiscal planning and infrastructure investment by appropriately reflecting climate risk and vulnerabilities to efficiently allocate resources and effective response to extreme events. And then, so basically, around this work is to take the current budget system and then give an estimate of how much commitment is already existing from the South African government. And then we are currently in phase 2 of the piloting of the CBT framework, where the DFFE has been nominated as one of the lead institutions that will assist in terms of tagging our budget system. And then we also intend to provide provinces and municipalities with support. We already we have engaged with SALGA on a joint initiative to support provinces and municipalities and capacitate them in terms of climate change mitigation. So part of that process will also include supporting provinces and municipalities to capacitate them with this piloting of the CBT phase. So also from the work also undertaken by National Treasury, which we are also supporting, was the Green Finance Taxonomy, which was the climate finance tool, which provides common language to govern what is recognized as green in a credible, consistent, and dynamic way. It provides market clarity and certainty in selecting green investments, reduces financial sector risks through enhanced management of environmental and social performance, reduces the cost of associated with labeling and issuing of green financial instruments, and unlocks investment opportunities to match demand and supply. So basically, the tool is a guidance in terms of how private sector also needs to get involved in supporting climate change agenda, and to also uh, become or mobilize finance and make finance available for projects to become implemented at provincial and as well as local municipal level. And then the rollout plan, the city of Tshwane, for example, identified touch points in the budget process to embed the taxonomy based on discussions and sample implication, and working alongside development of sustainable bonds framework. So municipalities are, are autonomous in terms of being able to ascertain funding, but again, they have to consider National Treasury regulations for them to be able to access funding. So the green finance economy sort of guides that process. And then the next steps with regards to the green economy, discussions with financial regulators on and acquire regulatory guidance, and then mainstreaming green into the economy, social into green, and the local SA context into the just transition, evidence-based policy and regulatory impact assessment, which requires data and disclosures, and then position Treasury as part of a systematic response. And then National Treasury was also undertaking studies on taxonomy comparison with other countries. And then part of the climate finance reporting under the enhanced transparency agreement. So it is very important for provinces and municipalities to also report their climate finance needs, because they assist us in informing this process in terms of the reporting to the UNFCCC and through the Paris Agreement under the enhanced transparency framework. So we are currently conducting our first, compiling our first BTR by annual transparency report, which will be submitted towards the end of either this year or early next year. And then part of this process, there's a need to communicate climate finance needs from provinces as well as municipalities, so that this information will help us in and also help the global community to be able to avail climate funding opportunities. And then some of the existing opportunities for municipalities include C40 Cities Finance, Global Infrastructure Facility, global platforms. So these are international climate finance facilities that can be accessed directly by municipalities through approaching these websites. There's plenty more, but we are still in the process of compiling all of these information sources so that we are able to share them with provinces and municipalities, so that those that are applicable to them can then apply to be able to access the funding. And these also form part of the the opportunities. This presentation will be shared for everyone to be able to access this information. So from a domestic point of view, we already have existing climate financing mechanisms for climate change and local government. And then recently, there's also an appetite by National Treasury to implement reforms to accommodate climate finance needs domestically through these existing infrastructure grants. Your municipal infrastructure grant, and then your also the regional bulk infrastructure grant. So already National Treasury is working towards greening these aspects and to take out or emphasize the how climate change um, aspects can be incorporated into these existing grant mechanisms, and then also maybe making provisions to increase the grants, and then people with uh, municipalities and provinces with climate change projects can be able to tap into these already existing grants. And then this slide basically just shares the climate finance proposal development. This is just a generic proposal development plan to basically just assist municipalities and provinces when applying or accessing grant to consider these aspects while developing their proposals. But proposals also, whenever calls are advertised, they're always specific. But within those proposals, these are the key aspects that need to be well communicated as well. So you incorporate these aspects as well as the requirements of that are set out in the advertised or funding calls, and then it will entail a good proposals. You can also maybe and inquire from us on how through any application that the municipality or province is making to obtain funding from an institution. We can, as national, we can also, be involved and support you to be able to access that facility. And then continued, these aspects also need to be well uh, articulated in your proposal. And then how can how municipalities can access climate finance information. So again, this process can only be enhanced through information sharing, and then also municipalities should always be on the lookout for funding calls uh, that are advertised on the aforementioned website, as well as we are still in the process of compiling more climate funding websites where people will be able to uh, develop necessary proposals that are tailored for those specific project they are applying to. And then the issue of bankability of the proposal is also very critical. So we also intend to support provinces and municipalities on that aspect. And then municipalities and provinces are also autonomous in terms of approaching um funding institutions and DFIs and communicate how they want to be supported. So from a DFFE perspective, uh, provinces and municipalities also we also need to be well aware of how they wish to be supported in terms of accessing finance. So uh, communicating their needs is of critical importance. And then in terms of credibility of municipalities, so as you may be aware that as much as municipalities and provinces are autonomous, they also are guided by national treasury regulations to be able to engage in debt and concessional finance. So all of these aspects also need to be considered when engaging, for example, in debt, and then there's issues around co-financing.
No, we seem to have lost you, Sibusiso. Seems to have dropped again.
Oh, sorry.
Ah,
Yeah.
back.
So,
Okay.
yeah, I'm back. Yeah. So, from a credibility's point of view, municipalities are guided by national treasury regulations in terms of accessing climate finance as well as engaging in debt. So, there are regulations by national treasury to guide that process, which municipalities also need to be in compliant of. And then this slide highlights the debt uh, and compliance conditions. And then this process is also guided by Section 33 of the Municipal Finance Management Act in terms of uh, how municipalities wishing to enter into contracts that imposes financial obligations on the municipality beyond the 3-year recovery in the annual budget for that year, they must follow these regulations. And then some of the emerging regulations when it comes to climate financing is that we have the Article 6 mechanisms, and then South Africa has also uh, have developed a framework to guide carbon this carbon trading between two countries. So countries wishing to um, invest in certain municipalities, the Article 6 framework will sort of guide that process. And then we have the just transition framework project implemented within municipal boundaries, Presidential Climate Commission, climate finance landscape studies. From the presidency, we have the JET IP, uh, which basically highlights three priorities: electric vehicles, green hydrogen, as well as electricity, the greening of the electricity system in the form of renewable energy opportunities. So some of these projects implemented by JET IP will already be existing within municipalities. And then municipalities can make contact with the JET IP people to be able to inquire as to what opportunities are available. And then yeah, this slide basically highlights the importance of municipalities and provinces to be able to communicate their needs to us, so that these needs are well documented and reported efficiently to the UNFCCCs, because they also inform the investor community in terms of then establishing um, financing facilities that will be able to accommodate the needs of that are currently being raised at the ground level. Thanks, colleagues.
Great. Thanks very much for that very interesting presentation, Susan. I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of interest and will be some questions. I just want to check, are you going to be staying on the line for the question session later, or should we take a few questions now?
Yeah, I can take a few questions now from.
Okay, we'll just take a few
Yeah.
questions now, and then I'll ask everyone else if they can either put their questions in the chat, or if they can hold them until a later session. That would be good. So, Edwin, you have a question, and then Nolo Yiswo can have a question.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thanks to colleagues. And good morning, Sibusiso. Thanks for your insightful presentation. Mine is just the point of I need clarity when it comes to the training on development of proposals. Is it only targeted for selected municipalities, and what's the process of getting that assistance? Thank you.
Can I go, Luan? Or
Yeah, maybe ask your question, Nolo Yiswo, and then Sibusiso can answer.
Okay, no, that's fine. I will only just focus on a couple of things now, because I think the rest is really for intense discussion separately. But thanking the presenter so long. I think Luan, or rather, so I think we rely on DFFE to speak clearly on some of these things, or on the aspects. For instance, the JET IP, no use of terms like can be accessed, as if there's a can or cannot situation. Are these funds accessible, or are they not? And then maybe in a separate session, then we can then unpack on how the process can be embarked on. And also a clear awareness is needed there was a slide about the climate finance transparency framework, and the reporting that has to go into it by yourselves. And I'm just thinking in my mind, based on the discussion of yesterday, how does that tie in with the NDC formulation process and other reporting? And lastly, the loans of whatsoever nature, unless they are infrastructure related, I always wonder when it comes, maybe not your problem as such is bigger than you, but I'm just wondering how do they support sustainability then? Because if you are sustainable, from here we need to be resilient, we need to be better, and we need to be economically and otherwise sustainable. So if we're talking loans, other than if it's clearly for hard green infrastructure, how does that make sustainable? But the rest of it, outside the schools, it's just a training for a particular period. I strongly suggest that we engage so that we can actually explore platforms where these options are explored at length. Just to the one before, if you can just connect the last one to the speaker who just went before me. There was a project that Mikat Echo, the adaptation team, did in 2021 during the COVID time, where they were actually training municipalities on the funding application processes. I don't know whether the speaker is referring to that, or if you can just expand on that, if that was related to anything that you've just said now, because I know there was such a process that we were rolling out throughout the country. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Sibusiso, you want to respond to those?
Yeah. So I think yes, I am referring to that process, although it has uh, halted a bit from that aspect, but through this ICAT program, we were hoping to revive that aspect in terms of supporting subnational government, and also with our recent engagement with Salga as well. We intend to include that aspect as well in this new initiative we have embarked on, to be able to support provinces and local government on capacity development with regards to increasing this.
We've lost you, Sibusiso.
Sorry, it's on that aspect of the climate tracking framework. It's something that is being developed internally, because we also could not access funding and support to be able to develop it through appointing service providers to assist us. So we are working internally to develop the tracking framework to guide climate finance reporting. And then in terms of issues around the JET IP, we are trying to engage with the work that is being done by the JET IP, because they also haven't been well communicating with us as the DFFE in terms of their undertakings. So we intend to hold sessions with them to also get an update and to get them to account as to the type of activities that have been implemented under the JET IP, and also the type of support that can be availed to provinces and municipalities. So from that aspect, we are engaging with them. And then in terms of the support, as I was saying to Noloy, so that it emanates from the capacity development program that we had initiated through the local government support program with the team led by Mikateko from our angle. So through this recent engagement with Salga, we are reviving that process, and then we'll be able to continue supporting municipalities, and then municipalities also wishing to, who have urgent need to can also write to us, so that we can offer the support to them. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sibusiso. I see there's still questions from Lisa, Choice, Jody, and Dudu, but in light of time, could you please just hold those questions, and let's just do the other two presentations, and then we can do some more questions. You're also welcome to put them in the chat, but we'll try to get them answered at the end of the session. Otherwise, as I say, if you put them in the chat, we'll try to get answers for those questions. But for now, I think let's just thanks, Sibusiso. So hopefully you can stick around and answer some questions at the later question session just now, once we've had these presentations. Samuel, do you want to go ahead with your presentation on sectoral emission targets and emission target guidelines?
Yeah, thank you, Luen. Yes, I can go ahead.
Great, thanks.
I hope you are able to see my slides.
Yes, we are.
Okay. Good morning, colleagues. I'm just going to present on the sectoral emission targets, and also talk to the emission target setting guidelines. Perhaps colleagues, just from the very beginning of my presentation, I think I need to make it clear that these are two sort of different but interrelated topics. The sectoral emission targets actually are articulated in the just promulgated Climate Change Act 2022 of 2024, which essentially affect sector departments. And then the second part, which is the emission target guidelines. This is just a guidance material that we are preparing to support provinces, to articulate target setting in their own jurisdictions. But then I will highlight how are these also related in one way or the other. Well, I think, colleagues, some of the slides or materials could be a duplicate from our previous presentation. But colleagues, bear in mind that this is actually intentional because all of us, we are trying to, ingest as much as possible knowledge on the Climate Change Act, and also trying to understand how it will affect, our own operational space. So I think this has got everyone here is also interested in that. Well, in terms of the Climate Change Act, we know now that our country has promulgated the Act just recently in July 2024. You actually, all of you rigorously participated in the process to develop this Act. Essentially, the Act has got 7 chapters. But when you look at the Act, 6 chapters, and then it has got 3 schedules. But when you look at the Act, chapter 2 and chapter 3 are the most chapters that affect provinces and municipalities. I think that would also be followed by chapter 4 and also to some extent chapter 5, but I'll explain. Under chapter 2, policy alignment and institutional arrangement, the Act actually talks to all organs of states that we will need to align our policies to embed climate change. So this one talks to everybody. Then chapter 3 actually specifically is tailored for provinces and municipalities on climate change response. And then chapter 4 talks to national adaptation. But at the same time, we already know that, for example, the Act says that after 1 year of the national adaptation strategy has been adopted, then provinces and municipalities have to action as informed by the Act. So that means then that you need to keep an eye on chapter 4 in terms of adaptation strategy. Well, chapter 5 on the inventories, carbon budgets and assets. I think what is interesting there under chapter 5, of course, there are 2 key policy instruments, the carbon budget and the sectoral emission targets, as well as the emission trajectory. But in relation to the sectoral emission targets, there is also thinking around municipalities and provinces that they need to support sector departments to implement to achieve the sectoral emission targets. But that effort, of course, is not an obligation under the Act, but rather it's a support mechanism, and also where actually provinces and municipalities can also find their role in terms of achieving the overall sectoral emission targets. So basically, colleagues, this is just a reflection of the Act. Well, the slide actually now sort of like zoom in into specific sections of the Act that affect provinces and municipalities. We already now know that, for example, under section 15(1)(a), that what needs to be done there is for you to undertake a climate change needs and response assessment. And then also equally important, the Act, actually the time periods are legislated. It says within 1 year of the publication of the National Adaptation Plan. Now, actually, this talks to the earlier slide that you will need to keep an eye on Chapter 4 of the Act in terms of adaptation. But also, when you develop the climate change needs and response assessment, you'll not only be looking at adaptation, but at the same time, we advise you to also address issues around mitigation. So meaning you'll have to look at these two aspects. Now, under section 15.1d, the need to gazette, to develop and gazette a climate change response implementation plan, which now has to be done within 2 years of undertaking the climate change needs and response assessment. So that means then it means the period here, which is spelled out, is 2 years. This means now we'll need to sort of like properly plan because this time periods, they are regulated, as I mentioned earlier on. And then also under 15.3a, the climate change response implementation plan must include measures and programs relating to both adaptation and mitigation. So is that an issue that I talked to earlier on. And then, of course, in line with your constitutional mandates at either provincial or metro district level. And then 15.4, a provincial climate change response implementation plan must form a component of the provincial environmental implementation plan. If it is a metropolitan or district municipality under 15.5, this must form a component of the relevant municipality integrated development plan. So colleagues, this shows that the Act actually more or less, it's actually an attempt to mainstream climate change in your IDPs, for example. So it is not divorced from what you are doing already, because will be doing this in the context of for example, in the context of your IDPs or in the context of your EIPs for provinces. So these are some of the issues that you need to take into account. Colleagues, I just put this just to demonstrate, the building blocks of our efforts. As I mentioned earlier on, we also have examined the chapters of the Act. And then we are also, all of us, attempting to actually understand this description of all the sections, and then also comprehend the ones that affect our jurisdiction space. But I think at this stage, all of us, we now more or less understand each section. We more or less understand, for example, the description of each section and how it affects us. We more or less understand our responsibility. That is why the slide I'm showing is the green part, where I think we are now gaining ground in understanding the Act. Where we are now, basically, where we need to put effort now is to have a status quo, to understand what is it that currently we have that could support us to comply with the Act. That is the status quo. And then if you recall that under the current project, we did conduct the situational analysis exercise guided by our service provider, Contwana. And then we have a situational analysis report, which was actually came out as an output from that exercise. So that work actually fits into this status quo, block. Basically, it's an attempt to sort of like understand where things are at the moment. That is why I just painted this. Is it orange? I'm not good in colors. Yeah. Now, there are also other building blocks that we need to make inroads on. We know that the Act has got implementation requirements on all of us. And then some of the requirements, for example, there will be regulations that will be promulgated. Currently, we are working on the terms of reference to sort of like initiated a process for regulations on the Presidential Climate Change Commission to support, their institutional setup. This is just an example of, some of the regulations that are on the horizon. But also, in some instances, we will be required to develop guidelines to support us to comply with the relevant provisions of the Act. In some instances, we will need to have a look at our policy stock to see, for example, which policies will need to be readjusted in future so that climate change aspects, they are mainstreams. Hence, this means that for everyone, when now we are, for example, reviewing our policies, in the terms of reference that we draft, then we will need to, need to integrate issues on climate change. This is some of the issues that we have to keep an eye on. Colleagues also recall that we have got systems, tools, we have got infrastructure to execute some of the mandate of our institutions. For example, in our setting for the inventory, we have got the South African greenhouse gas emission reporting system. What we are doing, for example, we are having a relook to understand which elements of the system needs revamp or readjustment so that we are able to cater for us to for the system to support us to comply with the Act. So that means then also in your own setting, you'll need to also have a look at that to sort of like look what you have at hand and then what will need to maybe be done to, readjust your systems to support, you complying with the Act. Issues around institutional arrangements are also core. We know that, for example, the Act comes with new responsibilities. Some of them could be going beyond our current key performance areas. So these are some of the issues that we'll also need to have a look at. Implementation frameworks, issues around coordination. They will also need to be looked at. Now, also, colleagues, the issue of time frame also is important, equally important. As I mentioned earlier, the Act actually puts time frame for some of the provisions. Now, that means we will need to also incorporate that in our own, programming or planning frameworks. For example, to understand if I need to develop the climate change response implementation plan within 2 years of conducting a climate change needs assessment. Then when do I have to budget for this, for example? Because it means in some instances you need to implement a project, meaning you'll maybe have almost 1 year to develop and implement a project. So it means now we'll need to keep an eye on the time frames so that we don't find ourselves in non-compliance. So that is an issue that we need to keep an eye on when we plan our work programs. And then also, colleagues, another building blocks, which is also current work also in progress. I think most of you who attended the working group 9 yesterday, there was a presentation on the costing of the Act, basically to understand how much the amount of resources that will be required to implement the provisions of the Act as they affect, for example, sector departments, as they affect municipalities, as they affect provinces. So these are some of the issues that are being pursued. So, colleagues, this is just a reflection to just highlight these key building blocks so that you are able to understand how we to reorientate in terms of understanding how we are approaching this. Well, in terms of our current efforts, colleagues, this is what we are doing to drive this work stream. We are working on the emission target setting. This work actually it's tailored to support you to provide guidance how you can formulate target setting in your own place. And for this, we are actually developing a guideline to support provinces, metros, districts to establish provincial and local emission targets. And then this is what perhaps in the earlier slides I will focus on. The inventory, colleagues, I think we are also, this is also a component that we are working on. Both the target setting, the inventory is part of the ICAT project. The aggregation tool also, in terms of mitigation, this is the tool that we have also showcased to you to support you, understand your contribution towards the achievement of the NDC. Then the climate change needs and response assessment and the climate change response implementation plan. Well, for this one, we will be actually approaching our partners sort of like to get funding so that we could develop a specific guideline for that work stream. Colleagues, this is just a mind map, basically, to just demonstrate what is obligated under the Act for municipalities and provinces, and what is it that they're expected to do beyond the scope of the Act. The climate change needs and response assessment, as you all now know that they are now enacted, they are legislated under the Act. That is an issue that you need to follow on and conduct. And then, well, in terms of setting mitigation targets, once you are conducting the climate change needs and response assessment, you will then have to identify appropriate mitigation actions, which will be a component of your climate change needs and response assessment. An example, for example, would be, for example, an energy efficiency project, say that you are implementing. It could be a waste management, project that you are implementing in the sector, say in the waste sector. So it could be, for example, a project that is related to transport sector. Then you will then need to actually incorporate those in your climate change needs and response assessment. And then that will then develop a climate change, lead you to develop a climate change response implementation plan. And then you will then need to consider measures and programs related to mitigation. And then as a component of the EIP, if it's a province or alternative, if it's a metro or a district, as a component of your IDPs. And then what you see what is highlighted in blue, that is an area that is articulated actually in the Act. Now, for you to support sector departments to achieve the sectoral emission targets defined in the Act, which are actually talking to sector departments, you'll then have to ask yourself, are there measures identified related to policies that informed sectoral emission targets in the climate change implementation plan? If yes, then you can estimate the contribution of the provincial or metro towards the national policy's overall goal. For that, you could potentially apply the aggregation tool, which will then aggregate your contribution, and then you'll be able to see to what extent do I contribute towards the achievement of sectoral emission targets. Then you can, of course, quantify mitigation targets for your province or metro. And then if not, then you can ask yourself, can the mitigation goals articulated in the climate change response plan be converted to mitigation targets? And then if not, then you can, apologies, colleagues. If not, then there's no need to adopt mitigation targets. So, colleague, this is just a mind map to just illustrates all these things. Just a second. Colleagues, I would like at this stage maybe to just upload the guidelines for the development of the emission targets for provinces and local government, just to reflect the progress where we are now at the moment. Just a second, let me upload the. Are you able to see the slide?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, colleagues, this is just to put in front of your eyes the current version of the guidelines. This is still work in making. I think we presented this in our earlier presentation, but then I thought perhaps this time around it would be just helpful just to roll it through your eyes, just for you to just get a glimpse of where how the guidelines looks. Well, this is the current version of the guidelines. As you recall that it has got sections. Actually, part one, talk to sectoral emission targets. We are updating this actually based on the current updates. And then under two criteria for the selection of policies and measures for sectoral emission targets. I think we talked to that earlier on. Part two, the climate change mitigation emissions at provincial and local government, what we call the PETs and LGATs, which actually relate specifically to provinces and local government. This is a section that we would like to also make inputs on. We will, once we have actually finalized updating all this, we will recirculate again so that we can finalize this. The climate change response implementation plan, now we know that this is part of the bill. And then Premier's Intergovernmental Forum, these are all the aspects that are contained in the Act, not bill, Act, in the Act. The role of DFFE, here, this is just to spell out how we'll be supporting the process, and then the steps that we'll need to follow. For example, the provinces and municipalities will need to follow to adopt, to develop the emission targets. Starting with the greenhouse gas emission inventory compilation, developing baseline, developing climate change strategy, and then target setting process. So basically, it means some of these sections in the guideline, we are actually more or less able to identify where we have something, like for example, a province would have a climate change response strategy. Some of them they have, so we are able to identify, okay, I'm still in the process of developing the inventory, the strategy is in place, these are my plans. And then also check timelines. When is that needed against the regulated timelines in the Act? These are some of the issues. And then also the target setting process. This section clarifies all what needs to be done, issues around socioeconomic co-benefits, which is also important, more especially for municipalities and as well as provinces, because these are linked in a way to also service delivery issues, job creation and so forth. So these are some of the aspects that you have to have a look at. The MRV also equally important. Remember, colleagues, that the X actually will require us to report. That is actually MRV, where we'll need to report progress. So issues around MRV also are critical. So the guidance is also contained there. But as I mentioned, all these sections, they need enrichment. So this is where we are now. But definitely, once this is finalized, then we will then be able to see how we could, transition on to make sure that these tools are, are helpful to support us comply, in some instances, comply with the provisions of the Act. In some instances, support us in contributing towards the achievement of the NDC. Colleagues, I would like to stop here and thank you. Then I'll be pleased to perhaps get questions if there are any. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Samuel, for that very interesting presentation, and also for that document looking at sets in provinces and local governments. I think that is of great interest, and some of this I guess we'll be covering during the training session at the end of the month. But yes, right now I know we had another presentation from Brett, but we've just, in light of time, we've decided it may be more valuable to just open up the floor to questions now, rather, on these two, and we can always discuss the issues from Brett's presentation in the training workshop or at a later stage. So I think, because we feel the questions may be there may be lots of questions for the finance and for Samuel in this regard. So I think we'll go to open up the floor to any questions. Maybe we can just ask if Lisa and Choice, do you want to ask your questions, your finance questions from Sibusiso? Yes, Lisa.
Hi, thanks, Luann. It's not a question, it's more a comment, suggestion, I think, and this is something that we've been grappling with for years now, is we've done the training on proposal writing, we've done all the capacity building, but the challenge that we're experiencing is that to access a lot of the big global climate financing is the scale of projects at a provincial, especially at a municipal, but also at a provincial level, is just too small to actually meaningfully access these big climate funds. So there is a need for some sort of stronger, collaborative, centrally led programmatic approach to accessing these big climate funds, because it doesn't make sense for 12 municipalities to apply for something when they're doing the same thing, when it would make much more sense for a one proposal to go in covering all the municipalities or all the provinces that are wanting to do the same thing, because there would be a better chance of us actually accessing these big opportunities. And I just, again, putting out the call to our national colleagues, is there not some way that we can play a role in that collaborative space, rather than everyone trying to do their own thing, and then failing and not able to access anything? Yeah, so that's my big plea at the moment.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, Choice, do you have a question?
Yes, thanks. It's Choice, local government support Ngangala district from DFFE. My question is more on the staffing, special capacity in terms of human resources in the local government space, because I know if currently still a lot of local municipalities are still experiencing challenges in terms of implementing a lot of environmental management related activities or programs because of a shortage of staffing. And then now we have climate change, and the Climate Change Act is already now a law. And then obviously now municipalities are mandated, and that will also put pressure from municipalities in terms of having capacity to implement or to start to plan programs which are related to climate change. So what are the measures which are in place currently, maybe through Treasury and DFFE or any other sector, department or organization, to make sure that municipalities are prepared and ready so that they can able to plan and in relation to implementing projects which are climate related, because it does not help to have this kind of planning, or especially on the high level, whereas we know that all those programs and projects have to be implemented in the local government space and within communities. And then without resources, especially human resource, which have to plan, strategize in terms, and also develop, or prepare applications for project proposal, and you don't have that expertise, or you don't have prepare those municipalities to have such, it will also be futile, and it will take forever to implement, to reach the implementation stage which is adequate to implement climate change related issues. Thanks.
Great. Thanks. Sibusiso, do you want to maybe respond to those comments and questions?
Yes, colleagues. No, thank you very much for the questions. I think with regards to the first question, I think indeed if we could have like a more well-coordinated joint efforts to be able to, but again, if all municipalities as well as provincial government institutions are able to assist us as national in terms of reporting their needs, these could then be integrated into one like one effort, so that whenever there is an identified call, then we could pursue such an initiative where it could be a collaboration between various municipalities that are trying to address a certain issue. Then all projects could be collaborated and maybe implemented or combined under one aspect. For example, I make reference to when South Africa received the funding from the GCF. There was a municipality in through the adaptation fund, where various municipalities collaborated and combined one project, which was the Umgene Resilience Project, and as well as through the small grants facility implemented by the GCF, also under the adaptation fund, various projects were awarded with through that small grants facility, and then they were able to access funding to implement those certain projects that occurred in different municipalities. So it's always possible to as long as there's clear coordination mechanisms, and this could only be established if municipalities, they communicate the information to us, then we could then maybe share that certain municipalities are for or are implementing certain projects that are addressing either adaptation or mitigation actions, and then we could then they could then be collated, and then joint applications are then submitted to the financing facility. So that reporting aspect as well is critical to inform us to be able to facilitate and coordinate that process from our end. So yeah, I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay,
Also,
thanks.
yeah, maybe I can invite Dr. Somo Mabena to also comment further on the process. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, Samuel, and maybe when you respond, Samuel, there's also a question about the timeframes for finalizing the climate finance tracking framework, and also for finalizing emission target guidelines. Maybe you can respond to that as well.
Yeah, no, thank you, Luan, thank you, Sbu. Yeah, actually, these are very important issues raised by the participants. The issue of having, a more like a shared big project which will cover, say, a number of municipalities. Actually, this is an issue that even the private sector, they are seeing it as an opportunity. For example, now that the Climate Change Act is in place, they are aware that, for example, that municipalities are required to develop a climate change needs and assessment. They've got interest, for example, to assemble a group of municipalities and develop one project to cover so many municipalities. This is an area that we see colleagues as very important. Actually, we had an engagement with SALGA, also trying to look at what can be done in that regard. In our own area, I think we are able to support, for example, the development of terms of reference for the project that could have this broad, target stream. Because also remember, just like the current project, for example, participants here, they are from different provinces, different municipalities. Why can't we do the same when it comes to, say, investment projects? It's just that in our setting, we don't implement investment projects, but rather, support you, on capacity, on, following on such issues. But as I mentioned, we could definitely support you in the development of terms of reference. But also added to that, colleagues said this is an issue that we are taking to our seniors to present, so that to get their feedback on it, which we'll share on. Now, on the issue of the impact of the Act, in terms of, now that the Act is in place, there will be new requirements on, for example, HR, human resources implications and so forth. Well, remember the Act says that the Minister of Environment, which is my minister, will work in collaboration with the Minister of Finance to prescribe a financial mechanism to implement the relevant provisions of the Act. So meaning the issue of climate finance, one way or the other, is also embedded as a regulation, that the minister will then need to decide and indicate where money should come from to implement these provisions. Yesterday in the Working Group 9 meeting, we have actually, on our part, costed each provision of the Act as it relates to sector departments, as it relates to municipalities, to provinces, then put forward to National Treasury. This is still work in progress. Actually, this is where things are now at the moment. National Treasury is aware of that. They are aware that this will have cost implications on HR issues. So there's been a directive that all these elements need to be costed and then presented to National Treasury. We, on our part, did a cost estimate, which we presented yesterday. We can actually circulate, and we can circulate to the rest of the participants here on the costing of the Act. It talks to that. But bear in mind that that only covers the administration cost of the Act, not the investment cost of the Act. So that's where things are. So in terms of the investment cost, then of course the minister then will guide the progress going forward. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Great. Thanks, Samuel. Yeah, so if there's any other information that we can pass on to the group, then you can always just send it to Filling and myself, and we can always attach it and send it out to participants. Just in terms of the timeframes for the finance climate finance tracking framework, what are the timelines for those? For that, finalization of that?
Sbu, can you talk to that?
Yes, I think at the moment, maybe by December of this year, we should have a fully fledged framework that we can try and circulate for inputs from municipalities and also province.
Okay, and Samuel, the emission target guideline, when is that due for completion?
No, thanks, Blue. And unfortunately, we're a bit behind schedule, actually, because we had expected that we'll finish this by mid-August, but there's been a bit of delay. Hopefully, we'll finalize by end of August. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. And yes, just for everybody, we will share the slides with the group, so everyone will have the information that was presented today. Are there any other questions from the floor? Yeah, I don't see any additional hands. It seems like, though, there has been a lot of interests and a lot of questions. I'm sure that there will be questions as we go along, but for now, we don't see any more follow-up questions, and we're pretty much on time. Martin, do you have anything else that you need, or do you want to do the wrap-up for today's session?
Thanks, Luann. Just to say thank you to the presenters for the two interesting presentations. Also to note that if you haven't already done so, please fill in the registration form for today's webinar, even if you did fill it in previously for other workshops and the previous webinar for this project, please fill it in again for today. That's part of our reporting requirement back to ICAT. And also to let you know, as Luann said, we will share the information presented today, but also that this webinar, together with all the other workshops, have been recorded, and you can find them on the Gondwana YouTube channel. I posted the link on the chat earlier on. So if you want to go back to today's webinar or previous webinars, you can find that on our YouTube channel. So yes, thank you to everybody for attending.
Great. Thanks, everybody. And yeah, and also if you fill in the registration, it's also easier for us to communicate with everybody and pass on further information if we have everybody's details. But yeah, I'm very appreciative of the great support that we've had in these meetings. And then as far as ICAT goes, we are still around the ICAT project. We will have target setting guideline training towards the end of August, but we are also around if there are still needs for provincial support on any of the aspects that we've covered, which would be inventories or target setting or any of the information that we've discussed, the tools for tracking actions. So if there is still a need for support from the provinces, please do just get in touch with us so that we can see how we can support you for the duration of the rest of this ICAT project. Other than that, have a good day, everybody, and yeah, thanks for the support.